Whether it's hanging half 100 on them at Owen Field or the run rules on the diamond at Love's Field, we're giving you the breakdowns, the bets, and the hot takes from the perspective of two former OU Athletics employees. You're listening to the Mainline Podcast with Tyler Burton and Adam Jaquez.
Let's go! Let's go! Go!
Let's go. It's the Mainline Podcast. He's Tyler Burton. I'm Adam Jaquez. It's the loaded spring season of OU sports, so we've got a lot to cover tonight. We're going to kick things off with football, talking Jackson Arnold, where he ranks amongst SEC quarterbacks both today and where we expect him to finish by the end of the year. We'll be talking about some women's basketball as they head up the road to MCO for the Big 12 tournament. They are the number one seed there. They have a lot of accolades, the trophies, as Tyler shows here on YouTube. So we'll be talking about them. We'll be talking about softball and the end of the streak and how much concern level there might be around that program right now and throughout the rest of the season. We'll talk about baseball, the return of the infamous Adam's Optimism segment, because we need some optimism around baseball at this point. I think it's been maybe a year and a half since the last time we had Adam's Optimism potentially. So it's making a return there. We'll see if we get into some men's basketball as well. Unfortunately, for like the second or third week in a row, we happen to be going live and recording at the same time as the basketball game happens, even though we continually request them to move their game up or back later in the day. Hasn't worked yet, so we'll roll with the punches on basketball.
Well, from the look of it so far, they should have just taken the night off. Because
Maybe they did.
They've taken the night off on the offensive end, that's for sure. But yeah, Adam, things are good out here in Denver. Ultimately, we've got a lot to talk about tonight. You know, we're kind of diving into SEC quarterback tiers. That's ultimately going to be a lot of fun, a lot of new programs, a lot of new faces, a lot of, you know, just all around new teams that we're going to have to grow accustomed to watching and diving into a little bit more schematically. But yeah, I'm really excited about it. Regardless of what's being put out there on social media, the sky is not falling. Oklahoma softball will return tomorrow night to start another winning streak. So excited to talk about that. And then the return of everybody who's been following this podcast since day one, Adam's Optimism regarding the Oklahoma baseball program. It's making its return tonight. And then, like I said, UFC 299 coming up this weekend. It's got me in a good mood, Adam. I'm excited to talk all things OU tonight. Let's go.
Let's kick it off with Jackson Arnold here, talking about where he ranks within all of the SEC quarterbacks that are out there. Kind of surprisingly, you look at this, everyone on this list of SEC quarterbacks that we expect to be the starter, there's not really too many big QB battles necessarily, and everybody on this list has started at least one game. I'll run down the list real quickly here, and then I'll ask you, Tyler, where do you rank Jackson Arnold as things stand today before a game is played? I'll run down the list here, no particular order. Peyton Thorne from Auburn, Brock Vandegrift from Kentucky. I actually take that back. I think he's one of the guys the only guy that's not started a game. Taylon Green out of Arkansas, transferred from Boise State. Lenora Sellers. I guess there's two guys, so I'm bad on my info here. I don't think he started a game for South Carolina either. Lenora Sellers there. Blake Shapen, the old Baylor quarterback, now at Mississippi State. Diego Pavia, the former New Mexico State quarterback at Vanderbilt now. Garrett Nussmeier out of LSU. Nico Yamaliava down at Tennessee. Graham Mertz at Florida. Jackson Arnold, of course, at Oklahoma. Connor Wegman making his return to Texas A&M after having some injuries last year. Brady Cook at Missouri, who had a great year for the Tigers. Jackson Dart at Ole Miss, Quinn Ewers at Texas, of course, and then Carson Beck at Georgia and Jalen Milroe, potentially the top two guys. We'll see how the rankings sort out here from Alabama. So, Tyler, where do you rank Jackson Arnold as things stand today?
Well, that's an interesting question, because ultimately, you know, you really have to lay out the criteria of what you're going to base this off of. Are we talking about where does Jackson Arnold sit right now in terms of projecting what he is going to be game one, year one of the SEC, or are we trying to project, okay, this is what, you know, based off our expectations of Jackson Arnold, you know, we've seen the tape, we've seen the arm talent. This is what he ultimately projects what we think he could be, and this is how high he could finish, you know, in the SEC quarterback tiers. I think right now, Adam, when you look at the current layout of the SEC, you look at the quarterbacks that are on campus right now, you know, with these programs, I would kind of rank Jackson Arnold. And again, I'm not saying this is where he's going to finish, but as we, you know, move into spring football, I think that this is where Jackson Arnold starts in the, you know, in the echelon of quarterback rankings within the Southeastern Conference. I've got him right there in that 7 to 8 position. If you really want to look at this, Adam, if you want to go down from top to bottom here, I think that there's clear-cut 4 quarterbacks in the SEC going into this upcoming season that I would rank ahead of Jackson Arnold at this point right now. Jalen Milroe at Alabama, no brainer. You know, one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Fantastic season a year ago. He got better as the year progressed. He loses Nick Saban. Okay. But also at the same time, You're bringing in Kalen DeBoer from Washington, who's got one of the best overall offensive minds in college football. I would expect Jalen Milroe to take another step forward going into 2024. Carson Beck, Heisman Trophy frontrunner going into this upcoming season, just like we've seen at Alabama and Ohio State. Michigan is now one of those programs where year after year, even though guys graduate, expectations don't change, rosters don't change either. Well, I should say rosters do change. It's just the next man up mentality. Carson Beck, that Georgia offensive line, the skill talent that he's got out on the perimeter, I would expect Carson Beck to be a top 2 or 3 quarterback in the SEC again. This is where
hold on before we move on there. Like Carson Beck, I think there's a bad perception out there that he's a game manager. He's not. He's not Stetson Bennett. I think he's better than Stetson Bennett. This guy's potential first-round draft pick material type of quarterback. And because Georgia was just blowing out everybody that they played last year, people didn't really catch on to that. So Carson Beck, very good quarterback. Weird-looking guy. Might be the weirdest-looking quarterback since Spencer Rattler. But a very good quarterback. Continue with your top 4 there.
Yeah, top 4. This one, I kind of go back and forth a little bit when we're debating 3 or 4 here. I'm going to go with Jackson Dart at the number 3 spot here, coming from Ole Miss, a guy that's been in Lane Kiffin's season for a couple of years now. He's a guy that, he's not the most physically gifted quarterback, when you look at his ability to throw the football, but he's tough as nails. He's got, the ability to make plays with his legs. He can stand in there in the pocket and take that shot while delivering the ball downfield. With the talent that he's going to have around him, particularly out at the wide receiver position, with what they've got coming back, with what they've added in the transfer portal, Jackson Dart, I would put him at the number 3 quarterback position in the SEC going into this upcoming fall. This is where we'll touch on this. I'm going Quinn Ewers, number 4 from Texas. Still not sold on him. I know that he's, towards the top of everybody's draft boards for next season's draft, but I'm still not sold on him. He loses Xavier Worthy. You lose Adonai Mitchell, Jatavion Sanders. Steve Sarkisian, I think, is hands down one of the best schemers and offensive play callers in all of college football. When you look at what he likes to do schematically, the screen passes, the quick game, the complex delay route concepts that can cripple opposing teams' defenses, I think that Quinn is a beneficiary of an elite level scheme that Steve Sarkisian runs that is very quarterback friendly. So again, we'll see how it plays out this upcoming season. He showed up in one of the biggest games of the year, going into Tuscaloosa, knocking off Alabama, but then he kind of fell back to the pack a little bit, didn't play that well, got outplayed by Dylan Gabriel in the Cotton Bowl, and then he ultimately kind of disappeared a little bit in the biggest game of the season against Washington. But I'll throw Quinn Ewers at the number 4 position. Adam, you got any discrepancies there between 3 and 4?
I would agree with you on that. Quinn Ewers is interesting because a lot of people will say, "Oh, his stats don't look that good," and like they're fine. They're not elite. They're not Heisman level caliber numbers. And people will say, "Oh yeah, he was out with some injuries. He missed really just 2 games. He played in 12 games last year." Let me ask you this. Would you rather have QB who threw 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, was about 3,500 yards on the year across 12 games? Or would you rather have QB who played in 11 games, 20 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 157 QB rating? And obviously I'm giving one of those away. One of those is Quinn Ewers.
Yeah.
But do you know who the other player is here?
Is it Brady Cook?
Brady Cook is a good guess. He has very similar stats as well. I don't have those in front of me. I have Graham Mertz actually as QB, 20 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Very, very similar numbers. And Graham Mertz actually played 1 fewer game than Quinn Ewers. So there's something there about Quinn Ewers. I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback. Maybe he continues to progress because he definitely did between year 1 and year 2. But and it's kind of the tough part. Like if he came in as a 3-star, we'd be like, yeah, this guy's solid. This is a gamer guy. But the fact that he was a 5-star, he was one of the highest touted quarterbacks. I know Josh McCuistion over at Sooner Scoop compared him to Trevor Lawrence quite a bit coming out of high school. He hasn't yet come close to that potential. So Is he good? Is he going to have lots of good players around him continually at Texas, even with a lot of his receivers gone? There's new guys that transferred in that are very solid there. I think he'll still be good. I just wonder, is he what he is, or does he have another level there? But yeah, I agree. I think he's probably that bottom tier of that, that first group there.
So funny enough, I actually had Graham Mertz at the number 5 position on my rankings here. And I know that Florida is probably going to be terrible next season, but that's not going to fall on the shoulders of Graham Mertz. Like you alluded to, Adam, 2,900 yards, 20 touchdowns to just 3 interceptions, completed over 70% of his passes. He was able to make Florida a lot better. He was able to win a couple more games for the Gators last season than they ultimately would have without the kid. But if Florida wants to get back into the win column, despite what's going to be probably the toughest schedule in all of college football next year, then it's going to rely solely on the shoulders of Graham Mertz. You look at what Florida's got next season. They've got Miami, they've got Texas A&M, they've got to go to Starkville, they've got to go to UCF in the non-conference. And then, oh, by the way, towards the back end of your schedule, not only do you have to go to Tennessee, but you've got to go to Austin. You've got to go to Tallahassee to take on Florida State. And then also you sprinkle in there, you've got Georgia, LSU, and Ole Miss. So Graham Mertz, while I think on paper is one of the more talented quarterbacks in this conference, I don't think that his schedule is really going to allow him to showcase how good of a quarterback he can be. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he'll rise to the occasion. But don't be surprised if you see a guy like DJ Lagway kind of sneak in a little bit of playing time down in Gainesville this upcoming season. Adam, next one that I have here, I know that this isn't going to make Oklahoma fans very happy, but when you look at the production and the season that he had a year ago, you got to give credit where credit's due. You got to give Brady Cook from Missouri the love. When you look at what he's got coming back this upcoming season, Luther Burden, arguably the best wide receiver coming into this season in college football. Theo Weiss returns. They've got one of the easier, more manageable schedules in the SEC in 2024. Yes, they've got to go to Tuscaloosa. Yes, they've got to go to College Station, take on Texas A&M. But when you look at the rest of Missouri's schedule, the way that this thing stacks up, Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, Vandy, South Carolina, Mississippi State, Arkansas, this is a very favorable schedule that Missouri and Eli Drinkowitz is going to be able to navigate next season. And I think that Brady Cook's poised to have another big season. Adam, anything with that before we get to it? Because I still haven't reached Jackson Arnold yet.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in lockstep with you. These were my top 6 guys here. And then I think it becomes very much the mystery box because everything below this really wasn't a starter last year. His newer was a guy that was waiting in the wings that we thought was highly talented. So then it just kind of becomes preference at that point as far as everybody else that's below this line here. So I'm curious to see, is Jackson Arnold at the top of those guys that are either completely unproven, haven't started very much at all, or someone maybe that transferred into the SEC from out of conference, like a Blake Shapen, for example. Are you ranking him higher than Jackson Arnold? Again, as things stand today, not what we think it will be at the end of the season.
Yeah, I'm definitely not ranking Blake Shapen ahead of Jackson Arnold. I know he's got the experience. I know he's played a ton of football at the Power 4 level, but I'm not putting him up against JFA. Next for me, Adam, and again, we're kind of merging into the camp where all of these guys probably for the next 3 to 4 picks are going to be very similar. A lot of their production this upcoming season is going to be based on their ability to grow over the course of the offseason as a quarterback. How healthy are they going to be able to stay? How good is the supporting cast around them, particularly the offensive line, which we'll get to here in a minute with Jackson Arnold. Next pick for me, if I'm going to go into this upcoming season with this guy being fully healthy, I'm going down to College Station. I'm taking Connor Wegman, coming off of a season-ending foot injury. But I think a lot of people forget that in those first 4 games that he started, he threw for almost 1,000 yards, 69% completion percentage, 8 touchdowns in just 4 games as a starting quarterback for Texas A&M. And I think that, going into this upcoming season, you bring in new offensive coordinator Colin Klein in there calling plays for the Aggies. I think that Connor Wegman has an opportunity to really build on what he did through the first part of last season if he stays healthy. Now, Adam, is Connor Wegman part of this, or can I go into where I've got Jackson Arnold?
I agree with you on Wegman, though. I think he's one that's been forgotten a little bit, and people just kind of toss him aside as, A&M's a joke program, but I think he's elite, got an elite talent set there. It's just a matter of how much the transition happens. So I agree with you on that one.
Yeah, next, I kind of went back and forth here. Do we go with Jackson Arnold here at number 7 or 8, or do we go with Nico from down there in Knoxville, Tennessee? I'm going to go with Jackson Arnold in this situation. I know that we're going to get that, first SEC matchup in Norman where you're going to get Jackson Arnold versus Nico.
That should be great.
Those
fantastic. 2 guys, first opportunity, that should be awesome.
It's going to be must-watch CTV. But I'm going to go with Jackson Arnold here. He has all of the capabilities, Adam, to be a top 5, maybe even a top 3 quarterback in this conference. And if Oklahoma is going to have the type of season that we want and expect them to have, Jackson Arnold is going to have to live up to that talent. and those expectations. He's got the arm talent. He's got the high football IQ, the athleticism, the ability to make plays with his feet. And like we saw time and time again from Baker Mayfield, Jackson Arnold possesses some of that same type of moxie, those intangibles that he brings whenever he plays plays football. And I think that he has everything that it takes to be the next great signal caller at the University of Oklahoma. He's going to have one of the best wide receiver corps in the entire country, led by Nick Anderson, Jalil Farouk, Deion Burks. And I know that the schedule, when you look at it on paper, it's a gauntlet, especially for a first-year starting quarterback in the SEC. But I believe that the offensive line's ability, Bill Beanbo, it kind of feels like it always comes back to Billy B. I think that the offensive line's ability to gel during the course of fall camp in those first few games this season, that's going to ultimately dictate how successful Jackson Arnold is going to be. Because if you give this kid time to throw, like we've seen time and time again, he can pick you apart. He can make plays outside of the pocket as well. But I think that the offensive line is really going to dictate how good of a season Jackson Arnold can have. And Tattoo, I know, logo behind me, it's old. It's the OG logo. We're working right now to get this thing updated, make it look a little bit better here in the office.
And good call out there from Tattoo Baker in the chat about Baker's first SEC matchup was against Tennessee. So could be some history coming up there. Mm-hmm. So Jackson Arnold, you're saying, I think, was number 8 there behind Connor Wegman. Okay. Yeah. So number 8 there, about middle point. I think that's a fair evaluation. I think some people could say Nico's ahead of him there as well. Nico's going to be a guy that probably gets maybe some more positive press because in his bowl game, he was able to go up against Iowa where all they had to do was score 7 points. And the outcome of that looks a little bit nicer, even though his stat line was just kind of okay. Like he rushed for a couple touchdowns, but Iowa's tough defense, so tough matchup for a true freshman quarterback there. But I agree. I think Jackson Arnold, you could definitely make an argument that, hey, he's going to be at the top of all those guys that are completely unproven and the guys that transferred in, like a Taylon Green to Arkansas, who is not a very good passer in my opinion, or a guy like Blake Shapen, who's proven kind of what he is over the course of the last couple of years in college that's going to Mississippi State now. So Jackson Arnold has, his place in line as of right now. He's going to try to move up in line there. And I got to give a shout out to our sponsor. Anytime I talk about lines, I got to talk about 29th Street Tag Agency. They're one of our sponsors here at the main line. They pride themselves on great customer service. So you know that when you go there, you'll be able to get your needs taken care of quick and be out the door as fast as possible. They're linked in our show notes here, both on YouTube and on the podcast format for those listening later on. They're great for, your tags, your licenses, whatever it is that you need for automotive needs. And we appreciate them supporting the show here at the Mainline Podcast. Let's not focus nearly as much, I guess, on who's below Jackson Arnold here, because we've talked through some of those guys. I think Garrett Nussmeier is probably, and Nico are probably the two that he's probably the most, in competition within that group there and that kind of tier. So let's talk a little bit more at the end of the season here. Where does Jackson Arnold end up potentially? What's his ceiling? And I guess I'll point out first and foremost that when we talked through that top tier, we talked about Jalen Milroe and Carson Beck, two guys that were probably not on the radar at all to be in that top tier at this same time a year ago, but here they are today. So it's definitely possible. Like, it's proven. I think we could all look at that and go, yeah, Jackson Arnold's higher ranked, coming out of high school than both those guys. He's got more maybe high-end potential, but again, it's completely unproven.
Yeah, you make a really good point. I mean, ultimately, Jalen Milroe, he was benched after the first couple of games this season, and then ultimately he was able to find his way all the way back and, be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And I think that for Jackson Arnold, when you try to project what he could ultimately be, like we alluded to, he's got all this physical talent around him. Out at the wide receiver position, Gavin Sawchuk, Javonte Barnes, they're going to be loaded at the running back position, but it really does come down to that offensive line for me. And like we talked about, we're 46 days away from the spring game. You've got double-digit practices that Jackson Arnold is going to be able to have over the next few weeks here, where he is the guy. He is the solidified quarterback one. He's the face of this Oklahoma football team going forward. And so the fact that he's going to be able to use these practices to work with Seth Luttrell and Joe John Finley and, get all of those starting reps, that's only going to make him better and a lot more comfortable in this offense going forward. And then, like we talked about, you've got all summer to work with your guys. And then you've got an entire fall training camp to be able to get yourself not just physically fit, but get yourself to a point where, you have all the confidence in the world going into this season to where you can go out there and get it done. And then I know that we've talked about it, but, Oklahoma does have a very somewhat favorable start to this season where you've got Temple at home. You've got Houston coming to Norman. You've got Tulane, a Willie Fritz less Tulane team coming to the Palace. So Jackson Arnold's going to have an opportunity, throughout the first 3 weeks of September to kind of get his feet wet and get himself into a position where once Tennessee does come into town on the 21st of September, it's all, all hands on deck. All the cylinders are firing and he's ready to go, and he's playing hard. He's playing fast, and, he's playing well. So I think that Jackson Arnold, he has all the physical tools, and I think that if he can stay healthy and this offensive line can come together like we've seen time and time again for Bill Beanball's group, I think you're looking at a top 5 quarterback in the SEC when the season's done, because he's going to have the opportunities, Adam. It's not what you do, in the months of September or even the beginning of October. How do you close out the season? Are you going to be able to go on the road? You go into Death Valley late at night in November to take down Garrett Nussmeier and LSU. Can you knock off Alabama coming to Oklahoma? Can you go on the road to the Grove and out-duel Jackson Dart? There's going to be a lot of opportunities where this kid's going to have the entire eyes of the nation, of the college football world on this kid. I think he's up to the challenge.
I have a little bit of scar tissue on this one, because it wasn't that long ago that we could have said the exact same sentences, paragraphs, so on and so forth about Spencer Rattler. And I think we did. We had a lot of those conversations going into that 2020 season, going into the 2021 season with, we know he hasn't really played much, but he's clearly a 5-star. He's clearly going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12. And he had some times, he had some moments. He's not a total bust or anything like that, but there is always a scenario, and I know people go, Spencer Rattler was a head case. Like, that's not always why, someone falls out of favor or doesn't live up to their rankings. Look at Graham Mertz, for example. He's a guy that was a top 60 quarterback in the nation coming out of high school, has done solid at Florida, but certainly not at the ceiling that we probably all thought he was, when he came out of the Kansas City area.
I'm gonna say one thing regarding the Jackson Arnold Spencer Rattler comparison that you just made. One of those quarterbacks was respected and beloved by the guys in that locker room. One guy was not, to an extent.
True, and I'm not saying they're totally different players, different personalities, different ways they approach the game, and so forth. There's not a comparison there. I'm just saying at the same time, we've seen a very small sample size of Jackson Arnold. We've seen some good things.
Sure,
we haven't seen anything that I would say is big red flag warning sign, like boneheaded plays or anything like that. But it's just such a small sample size. So I think it's fair to say, he's ranked 8th. He does have a really high ceiling. He could be in the top 3 by the end of the year. But also at the same time, it wouldn't surprise me if he finishes the year 9th or 10th on this rankings list, because you just never know what you're going to get. There's just such a small sample size. It's all projection at this point.
And like we've talked about, this is up to Jackson Arnold, and this is where he's able to use the next 6 months to, get himself physically fit to where he's ready to step in and take this opportunity and run with it. And, the last thing on Spencer Rattler, unlike the situation that Jackson Arnold finds himself in, he doesn't have a guy as talented and the clear-cut better quarterback standing behind him in Caleb Williams like Spencer had to deal with. Yeah. Jackson's simply not going to have that opportunity or not have that situation. I know that, Michael Hawkins is talented. I know that Casey Thompson is a veteran guy that's, played in a ton of big games, but this is Jackson Arnold's team. He's the guy. He's the face of this football program outside of Billy Bowman and Danny Stutzman. I think that you're going to see Jackson Arnold. There's going to be some growing pains. Make no mistake about it. Very rarely does a kid in college football in his first year as the starter, unless you're Johnny Football, which we hope it's the same level of production. Hope the antics aren't the same. I don't think that it will be, but it's not very common that you see a guy come in his first year as a starting quarterback in the SEC and really kind of take the league by storm. He's going to have his moments, but he's also going to have his growing pains. He's going to struggle a little bit. That's what you expect with a young new quarterback. But I think that you're going to see a lot more, bright, shining moments than you will dark. And I think that that's kind of like what we've talked about on this podcast, Adam, for the last few weeks here, where, again, I think that Oklahoma, 8 or 9 wins this season, that's good. If you can figure out a way to get to double digits, Brent Venables is, short list for coach of the year. But I think that with what Oklahoma is building with the roster depth, the competitive depth, the recruiting continuing to get better and better, you're starting to stack these classes. 2024, I think, is going to be a springboard for this Oklahoma football program and Jackson Arnold to be able to rise and elevate as you move into 2025 and 2026.
At the very beginning of this segment, we talked about Quinn Ewers and how we still aren't sure, is he good? Is he being, held back? Is he Like we're not really sure exactly like what's up with him because he should be better in theory. And we talked about how the receivers that he had, the skill talent he had, probably helped him maybe look better than he was potentially. So I think that element could come into play for Jackson Arnold. Like maybe if he's not at the level that we think he should be as a 5-star quarterback in only a second year of college, I think he'll still have the best receivers and maybe even the best set of running backs in almost every game he plays this year. Maybe Mizzou has better, a better 1-2 and Theo Weiss and Luther Burden. Maybe Texas has some guys. But I think overall, Oklahoma's going to have the better, deeper room from a wide receiver perspective. So, and even against Ole Miss too, I think OU probably has better receivers there.
That would be a fun side by side because Ole Miss is stacked.
They are. It's a conversation, though. It's a conversation that OU could potentially have the best wide receivers in every game they play, potentially, or in like 90% of the games they play.
And I know that it's not Jackson Arnold's fault, but this is what you have to deal with when you sign up to play quarterback at the University of Oklahoma, where you look at the tradition, you look at the amount of success and the greatness that we've seen at this position over the last, even just take it back the last 20 years. And I know that Baker has been dominant, the most beloved Oklahoma Sooner in program history. What he did, what Kyler, what Jalen did, what Caleb did, what DG did. You go back and you look at the schedule, not a single one of those quarterbacks in any time that they wore an Oklahoma uniform had the level of competition that Jackson Arnold's going to be facing for 14 or 15 straight weeks. So again, I know that people are going to have a high level of expectation. Jackson Arnold sure as hell has high expectations at himself. You don't get to where Jackson is right now without having that growth and belief and confidence in yourself. But, I mean, let's make no mistake about it. Just because you play quarterback at the University of Oklahoma, that just doesn't automatically just basically guarantee that you're going to be that next, great thing in college football. But I think that with what Jackson Arnold is, and again, he's only been in college for a year now. I think that he has all the tools in the world to be able to go out there and showcase his abilities and be that next great guy to wear the crimson and cream.
Let's talk a little bit about women's basketball here and kind of how they've had such a successful run here. And as they head into the Big 12 tournament, then we'll talk some softball and get back into some baseball, maybe some men's basketball as well. Actually, I'll talk a little bit about men's basketball right now because we always hate kind of talking about men's basketball because they are often playing when we're recording. But I think it lines up really well with our newest sponsor here at the main line, which is Prize Picks. They're an app that you can download on your phone. You can play on the computer as well, but it's essentially daily fantasy, and it's a ton of fun. All you do is just go in. They've got different setups there as far as, a good one example that I did today was Rivaldo Soares, 17.5 combined points, assists, and rebounds. He's already at 17 right now with over 10 minutes left in the second half there. So I feel good about that one, picking more on that one. So even though OU basketball maybe isn't playing the best on the court, you can still get in the action a lot with Prize Picks there. They're the #1 fantasy sports app. They're able to be played in multiple states, 30 states across the country, including Oklahoma, California, Texas, and Georgia. It's really simple to play. You can make your picks and submit any entry in less than 60 seconds. And I think a pretty cool thing too, I made a second play on Javian McCollum. They give you injury insurance essentially, because if someone doesn't play, you don't lose that money. So I thought he had a really easy one there tonight of over 1.5 or more than 1.5 3-pointers to make there, and he didn't play, so don't lose the money there. So check out Prize Picks. They're linked in our show notes, both on YouTube and on the podcast, and we appreciate them supporting the show. Let's talk a little bit about women's basketball, though. Got some accolades coming in the door for the Sooners ladies there before they head off to Kansas City, get a bye for the first round, and we'll see how things play out there in the Big 12 tournament.
Yeah, I mean, do we just want to go ahead and advise Joe Castiglione to break out the checkbooks, do whatever it takes to not just give an extension, but let's just go ahead and break the bank account for Jenny Baranczyk. Back-to-back Big 12 champions. First time that this program has done this since 2006, 2007, back when back when the Paris twins were in Norman. But yeah, like you said, Adam, 20 plus win season. You go 15-3 in conference play. You look at the accolades that came out a little bit earlier today. Skylar Van, Player of the Year, Peyton Verhulst, Newcomer of the Year, Jenny Baranczyk, rightfully so, no surprise, Big 12 Coach of the Year. And when you just look at what this basketball program has done, and I know that for a lot of listeners that have been following this podcast, for the last 4 to 5 seasons, dating all the way back to the Sherry Cole era, I know that Sherry did a lot of good things for this program. She probably stayed a little bit longer than most people would have liked. But getting Jenny Baranczyk in here, being able to hire her to come into Oklahoma, the way that she's transformed, not just the level of play on the court, the talent on this roster, but she's changed the level of, I want to say, interest. She's changed the amount of attention and eyeballs that are on this women's basketball program, and rightfully so. Anytime you win 2 straight Big 12 championships, you're obviously doing something right. So, huge shout out to Jenny Baranczyk and this women's basketball team, this coaching staff. And Adam, one of the best parts about it, anytime you go on and you win the Big 12, you earn a bye going into the Big 12 tournament this upcoming weekend. So talk to us a little bit about what fans should expect. What's the upcoming schedule for OU women's basketball when they kick things off here in conference tournament play?
Before I do that, Tyler, shame on me. I forgot to mention $100 that all of our listeners can take advantage of for Prize Picks. I should have mentioned this. All you have to do is download the app today and use the code Mainline for first deposit match up to $100.
$100.
Yeah, $100 free.
$100.
There you go. They'll match it up to $100. So all you got to do is download that app with Prize Picks. You can take advantage of that by using the special code there, Mainline. So as far as the path for what OU has in front of them in Kansas City, you get the bye. You're going to play either Oklahoma State or TCU in round 2. Would love to get another window over Oklahoma State, especially with that whole Lexi Keys situation there where she transferred in from Stillwater this year. She's been a nice piece, a nice addition for OU. Yeah, you've got Skylar Van, who won Player of the Year. You've got Peyton Verhulst, who was the newcomer of the year. You've got your Coach of the Year and Jenny Baranczyk. But Lexi Keys has played an important role in that whole season as well. So you love the way this team is contributing. Be able to probably beat an OSU or TCU in that second round. I think there's work to be done here because OU dropped down to that 5 seed projection as far as the bracketology predictions are going right now after taking that loss up in Lawrence against Kansas to cap out the regular season. So you want to be able to make a good
knocked him from 4 down to 5.
Yeah, and that's the line in women's basketball in the postseason of where you're going to host your first 2 games versus go on the road and potentially play that 4 seed in their home venue. So I think that's really important. I think there's a lot to play for in Kansas City here. I think you kind of need to get to that championship game to feel decent about moving back up to that 4 seed, because you're either going to play Oklahoma State or TCU, then you're going to have to turn around and you're likely going to play Iowa State or Baylor the following day. So that would then put you into a rematch scenario with likely Texas or K-State coming from the bottom side of the bracket there. So I think there's a lot to play for and a lot of interesting things to be watching for this weekend as Jenny Baranczyk and crew take on Kansas City as the number 1 seed, which is incredibly awesome for them and what they're able to do after they replaced so many players due to graduation and injuries coming into this season.
Yeah, you're the number 1 seed in the Big 12 tournament. You're the conference champions for the regular season, but there's no time to be complacent and, to pat yourself on the back. And Jenny and this coaching staff, they know that. And, Adam, the difference between getting that number 1 seed versus number 2, yes, I know that Iowa State's been a tough basketball team. I know that, you've had 2 pretty good games. The one in Norman just a couple of weeks ago against Oklahoma State was a little bit of a blowout, but anytime it's a rivalry game and you find yourself going up against Oklahoma State, anything could happen. But you get the bye. You've got the number 4 seed Iowa State on your side of the bracket. The fact that you're able to dodge Texas and Kansas State until ultimately the finals. If Oklahoma can play their brand of basketball, if they can continue to play at a high level, I think that they should find themselves in that Tuesday night matchup on March 12th against either Kansas State or Texas. But yeah, I think you make a really good point, Adam. If you can figure out a way to make it to that final game of the conference tournament, if you win it, no question, you're a top 4, four seed in the March Madness tournament. But make no mistake about it, regardless of where this team finishes, whether it's 4, whether it's 5, the way that this team is playing, the way that this team is playing defense, rebounding the basketball, shooting the basketball, I think that they ultimately have a huge opportunity. You just pray that you don't end up on the side of the bracket as Caitlin Clark in Iowa, because I did see one mock bracket where they did have them facing Iowa. I think it was the second weekend of the tournament. That's where it would land them. So again, take my money. I would watch Oklahoma try to guard Caitlin Clark. Not sure how well it's going to go, but makes no mistake about it. They're going to go out there. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
And I should mention that Prize Picks has women's basketball, so that can make it even more fun. I would say anytime you see 3-pointers for any of these ladies on the team, take them more. Always take them more with this team because it's fun to root for. They shoot a ton of threes. They make a ton of threes. They're exciting to watch. We love it. Another team that is normally really exciting to watch, but maybe wasn't as much, at least on Sunday, softball. They opened the new stadium. It was a little shaky at first against Miami, but they figured it out. You're kind of like, I don't know, this doesn't feel like a very storybook opening to the stadium. Turn around, you run rule a few games after that, and then you finish off the weekend with the end of the win streak, ending there at 71 against Louisiana. What level of concern should we have around this team, though? 0.
0. Well, I'll say 5%. 5% level of concern.
Okay.
The pitching does concern me a little bit because especially with kind of they've been dominant at times, but they've also been a little bit shaky, and they're going up against a little bit of inferior competition. You got to give Louisiana credit where credit's due. They caught Oklahoma on a bad day, and they took full advantage of it. So give a shout out to Louisiana ultimately. But again, you won 71 games, and like Patty Gasso said in the postgame, they're human. I mean, they went 71 straight games without a loss. And Adam, for all the people out there that are, saying that, okay, this is this softball program coming back down to earth. This is a program that's, they're not what we've seen over the last few years. This team doesn't have what it takes collectively to go out there and, win a 4 straight national championship. Pump the brakes. They're 71-1 in their last 72 games. And I'll remind you, the last time that this team did lose a game, which was in Georgia on the road in the regular season in Athens, I think that they didn't really look back, and they went on and they won another national championship. So again, call a spade a spade. If you really ask Patty Gasso, do you want to lose a game? No, make no mistake about it. But the fact that they're going to have to go throughout the rest of this regular season dealing with the talk of, okay, can they keep the win streak going, or is this the game where it finally comes to an end? Now you can kind of regroup. A loss isn't always bad. In a season this long, sometimes it takes a loss to really kind of go back to the drawing board, really kind of dissect and figure out what you have on your roster. Like I said, the pitching's been a little bit up and down, but I love what we've got in Kelly Maxwell. Kirsten Deal's been nice. Nicole May, that veteran presence in that locker room. She's going to be good. Adam, am I going too far in saying that maybe the lineup is kind of not what I expected right now? Because Patty's been playing, kind of musical chairs a little bit, moving players up and down the lineup, which I know we've seen this from her time and time again in the past, but I mean, she had Jada Coleman hitting in the 9 spot. She had Alyssa Burrito leading off. Is this just typical Patty Gasso, or are you concerned about this at all?
It felt disjointed, and it's felt a little bit like that over the last couple of weeks, in my opinion. And I think that's, you're still getting really elite hitting from this team, but we're used to like ungodly numbers from the hitting perspective there. And it's kind of funny because, I turned to my wife on Sunday and I said, I think there's only 2 people I trust in the state of Oklahoma. And it's Riley Boone and it's Alyssa Burrito, because they've been absolutely excellent. Throw in Kinsey Hansen there as well. So, I mean, when you have that many hitters, when you have 3 reliable hitters, I think that's still really impressive for any ball club. But we're used to, okay, the full 9 is lethal, and we're not quite there yet. I feel like we're kind of up and down. We're trying to figure out. I think there's been points where you can go, okay, the first 4 or 5, like we feel really good about, and then the back 4, we don't feel very good about them. And so, I don't know. It feels like there's a little bit of a yo-yo effect as far as the hitting lineup. There's not a lot of consistency there. And then when you flip things over to the defensive side of the ball and how pitching's going, still really good. You're giving up a team ERA of 1.39 compared to last year was under 1. Again, still very elite numbers, but is that a good enough combo with hitting? Right now, they need to make improvement to win another World Series, but I don't know. I expect them to make improvements. I'm just wondering, like, okay, is this going to be something that continues throughout the year?
Louisiana caught Oklahoma on a bad day where they played their worst game of the year so far. Louisiana got timely hitting. They had a SportsCenter top 10 play in the outfield that saved Oklahoma's ability to tack on a couple more runs. I'm not pressing the panic button on this whatsoever. Last time I checked, Patty Gasso is still in charge. This is still the best softball team, best softball program in America. They lost 1 game. Who gives a shit? This is a team that's going to bounce back. You've got Iowa State coming to town this upcoming weekend for the conference opener in Norman. They've got the midweek game tomorrow night, so they're going to bounce back in a big way. I just expect that this is just a blemish on the road. They're going to get back in the win column starting tomorrow night. And if anything, Adam, when you look at the softball polls that came out today, Texas got voted the number 1 team in the country according to a couple of different polls. It's just going to make that matchup in Austin that much bigger for these 2 programs when it comes time for these 2 to square off in the Red River rivalry. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
I think too, there's probably some fatigue of OU's greatness. Just the voters are probably looking for any opportunity to say, can we put anybody else in that number one spot? Can we talk about anybody else? There's some element of that.
If you're Patty Gasso, this is just perfect bulletin board material. The fact that she can go into this locker room and say, guys, we've won 71 straight games. We've won 3 straight national championships. We lost 1 game, and now all of a sudden the media, the talking heads, okay, they're going to go ahead and vote Texas ahead of us. This is just perfect. This is an opportunity for them to go back to the well, go back to the drawing board, get a few things polished up in the circle, kind of get a few things figured out within this lineup. I have absolutely no concern about this softball team going forward. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Get your licks in now, because it's not going to be much longer before you're not going to have that opportunity anymore.
Part of me hates that whole conversation of like, oh, we need bulletin material, or we need something that can really motivate that team. Or this loss was good. It was a good thing. Like, I hate ever saying that. I don't ever want to have that. And I know I have probably a different perspective than the players do. I talk the same thing when we talk football every year, and the preseason poll comes out and OU's number 7 or number 10 or whatever. And people go, oh, good. I didn't want to be ranked number 1 anyway. And I'm like, that's a load of crap. Like, the players, they want to be number 1. Like, they want to be on top of that. They want to be able to stick out their chest and go like, we've earned it. We're number 1 at any point in the season, really. So I'm not buying that. I'm not a fan of that. I want to win everything. I want everyone else to always be looking up to Oklahoma. So I know I'm different. I'm asking too much as a fan there, as far as softball goes.
It's time, Adam.
It's time. It's time for Adam's Optimism. If you're not familiar with this segment, it's something that we did probably seasons 1 through 3 a little bit of the main line. We're now on season 4. And so that means we've been through some baseball. We've been through some bad baseball. We've been through some good baseball. And when bad baseball is happening, it means we go into Adam's Optimism. So I'm not going to talk about any of the real negative things. It wasn't a great weekend for OU. You lose to 2 Northern teams. Not ideal. Here's the optimistic viewpoint of baseball. As we record, they're playing Wichita State right now. They're up 4-2. It's a midweek game. You never know what's going to happen with midweek games. But here's the optimism is around this baseball program. And if you're maybe are starting to tune in more since that World Series run in 2022, it's baseball. The best of the best teams don't win 70% of their games. There's going to be a lot of losses across the season on baseball. But when you look at the way this team is constructed, I don't think there's anything as far as a talent level that we're lacking. You look at the pitching, a lot more depth than last year, a lot more elite arms coming out of that bullpen, some good things that we've seen from the starters so far. And then on the offensive side of the ball, I think there's plenty of guys that can hit up and down that lineup. We know they've got speed. They haven't done as much chaos on the base paths this year because they've been able to produce runs hitting the ball effectively. And you've seen some nice guys coming in out of the portal, like Michael Snyder, for example, who I think leads the team currently in RBIs. So the makeup is there. Baseball is a mental game. I'm not super concerned about the mental aspect of it. I think there's a few coaching decisions basically resting on Skip's shoulders right now as far as leaving guys in a little bit too long on the mound, not pulling them when he should, or maybe taking them out too early. I think some of that becomes less of a concern throughout the year as certain pitchers improve just slightly, as the season goes on, and suddenly it takes that margin of error of as far as a coaching decision, as far as when they come in or out of the game, it makes that margin of error a little bit bigger for Skip. So I'm not too worried about things right now. Things ebb and flow in baseball. The year that we went to the World Series, we dropped a series to New Orleans. So things happen in baseball. There's going to be bad weekends, but I'm still confident in what this team has. They just need to play their best baseball, not in March, not in February. They need to be playing their best baseball by the time April and May rolls around, and June especially. So I think there's a lot to be optimistic about still.
Adam, you mentioned that they're in a midweek clash right now with Wichita State up 4-2 over the Shockers right now. When's going to be the next opportunity? What's kind of the upcoming stretch look like for OU baseball? What's maybe an opportunity where they can kind of string a couple of wins together, get back on the positive momentum track?
UCF at home this weekend at L. Dale Mitchell Park. UCF, the Golden Knights, they're okay. I think that's an opportunity for OU to maybe potentially get a sweep there, to feel really good about yourself. You can beat the Shockers here as we record Tuesday night. You could be looking at a series of games here where maybe you win 3 out of 4 over the week, and that would be excellent. That would be excellent to get your momentum going there. So I think that's certainly within the realm of possibility, especially when you're playing at home and you're able to feel a little more comfortable and continue to develop the cohesiveness of complementary baseball offense and defense from there. I think we should mention basketball just a little bit briefly. We always hate talking about things live while they're happening because while there are a lot of people in here watching us live, a lot of people are going to be watching, probably over 1,000 or more of our listeners are going to be watching or listening to this later on. And so it's kind of weird, but as it stands, OU really needs to get that 20th win. Maybe it happens tonight at home in the Lloyd Noble Center against Cincinnati. I don't think it happens on the road Saturday against Texas. And then I don't have any confidence really in going to Kansas City and doing much noise there. So OU might be playing for their tournament lives as we speak. Again, I'm demanding a lot from all these sports, but I feel like at the end of the day, like getting into the tournament, good. That's table stakes. I feel like that's not really something that we should be celebrating significantly at OU. Yeah. I think we should be making the tournament every year.
That should
am I being too harsh?
No, I think that at a program like the University of Oklahoma, that should be the level of expectation that you can find a way to be one of those top 64 teams at the end of each season, playing in March Madness. And, as we sit here right now, I think last time I saw it, Oklahoma was down 5 with about 7 minutes to play. So still a lot of time. And, I think that Cincinnati was ultimately the game when you looked at the final month of this season, they thought that Cincinnati would be the best possible candidate for Oklahoma to pick up that 20th win. Obviously, the news that comes out during pregame, Javion McCollum suffered an injury this week, day to day. He's not playing for Oklahoma this year. So the fact that they're even, within striking distance of Cincinnati right now, that just kind of goes a long way. And, talking about the way that this basketball team has played, you go 0-2 a week ago. Nobody wins in Ames right now. Then you come back against the number one team with Kelvin Sampson in the building. And, you're one play away. You're one play away from knocking off the number one team in the country. So again, I don't really know if Oklahoma does it. If they don't get it done tonight, I'm not sure where I see another win on the rest of the remaining schedule. So we'll see if they can figure out a way to kind of backdoor their way in to March Madness, because I just simply don't think that they're going to go up to Kansas City and make any noise whatsoever. So you bank on the wins that you've accumulated so far. Try to figure out a way to pick up maybe one more win between now and the time that the tournament committee kind of sits down. But again, I think that this team has done enough to get their way into one of those final few seeds in the NCAA tournament. But ultimately, there's always there's always one or two teams come conference tournament time that they steal some of those automatic bids that they may not previously have been thought that they were going to be, making an appearance in this tournament. So we'll just have to see. But if you're Oklahoma, go to Austin and win this upcoming weekend. Figure out a way to win one, maybe two games in Kansas City in the Big 12 tournament. You control your destiny. Go out there and find a way to win one more basketball game this year. Hopefully it's tonight.
Yeah, I would just love to see this program create some momentum. And I feel like they shoot themselves in the foot and don't put themselves in position in order to get that momentum. Because best case scenario right now, I think OU was probably projected as like a 9 seed. If they lose tonight, if they lose to Texas, they're maybe on the bubble. Maybe they don't get in at all. Yeah. Maybe they get in as a 10 or 11 seed at that point. But you just don't set yourself up for any type of success when you have to play a team that's pretty solid in that first round and then have to turn around and play a number 1, a number 3 seed, a number 2 seed, something like that. So you're just not able to create that forward momentum for the program the way things are constructed. But we're rooting for them. They're not necessarily fun to watch. Hopefully people are listening on and are later on and are going, wow, that's crazy. Like they got their 20th win against Cincinnati and it's all kind of a moot point at that point. But we'll see where things go from there. But I think that's going to be a wrap for us this evening here on the main line. We'll be back next week, or at least Tyler will be back next week. I get to go on baby duty as I become a dad here later this week. So we'll see how long that Tyler is running the things from here on the main line. But we appreciate everyone watching or listening to us this evening, and we will see everyone again next week for the next main line.